Let's go through the best zones in World of Warcraft. Not only because it's fun to stack them all up, but also because we can work out what really truly makes a zone great. Since launch, WoW ballooned to be the largest subscription MMO ever, and that success was in large part due to what is really the game's main character, the world itself. The inclusion of Uldum was really tenuous, but at the end of the day, its stunning art direction has absolutely won out, and it has got a place on this list. I still remember the very first time we got a glimpse of this zone via Total Biscuit's video, where he glitched his way in through invisible walls in the Cataclysm beta. For players at the time, it was a really exciting zone to see because we had been teased for so long by those massive doors in Tanarus. And when we finally made our way through those doors, we were met with a real treat. A zone stuffed full of wonderful art assets and just an amazing overall quality. Solid music was also there to back it up as well, and the place has so many cool set pieces, brilliant bits of Titan lore, and just really impressive sights. Questing, though, was a very, very mixed bag for me. I really loved the Ramkehen storyline, but sadly, our friend Harrison Jones nearly killed the whole bloody zone for me. His quests were tedious, full of overplayed jokes, childish, and constantly were interrupted by these awful cutscenes. A real pity, in light of all the zone has to offer, but not enough to knock it off this list because it's pretty fucking cool. Westfall makes it onto the list for being, in my view, an excellent second zone to a game. I first entered it near the end of Vanilla, and until the Cataclysm revamp, I always made sure to bring a good portion of my alts through it. The transition from the lush green forest of Elwin to what was almost a wasteland was very stark. It did a great job of signifying that you were heading away from civilization and out into the big wide World of Warcraft, where things went on and you were an adventurer. While Elwin was full of Alliance buildings and power, well, this place was not at all. It was quite a wide, open ruin of a zone, with the only real power being a solitary tower. And I think that worked so well. First of all, the aesthetic, while it is going for a more simple, plain sort of look, I think it's beautiful and I think it's very memorable. You always had a wide, open view of the world around you, which perfectly matched the fact it's just one solitary tower that is where you are safe. I think that was such a great feel to evoke at the very start of a game like this. Brilliant stuff. Its music is also one of my favourite ambient tracks, and it is of course home to one of the most memorable dungeons from back in the day. Now, much of what I say for Westfall actually applies to other similarly positioned zones in the game. Really though, where the fuck is the Defias Messenger? That thing always got my grill, and come on, if you're on a PvP server, yeah, I'll admit it did suck being ganked for, yeah, that stuff was not great, but overall, I think Westfall, pretty damn cool place. The Eversong Forest is one of the most beautiful zones in World of Warcraft. Despite being years old, it still looks fantastic today, and it sports some of the most effective music in the game. The whole place has this really serene and relaxed and sort of beautiful feel, which perfectly set the tone of the Blood Elves and their architecture. Of course, it's World of Warcraft, and having the Ghostlands and the Dead Scar, and also the sort of magic addiction stuff that was going on, really juxtaposed that beautiful feel, and I think that offset to the zone's tone worked splendidly and made this a highly effective starter place in the game. I'm going to throw in the Isle of Keldanas as well for this spot, because, well, come on, they look pretty darn similar, so it makes it onto this list for the same reasons. Both are stunning, and they were absolutely well ahead of their time, and I think both still hold up great today. Elwin Forest also makes it onto this list, and yeah, there are a few vanilla zones here today. I think they really deserve their place. These are the zones that World of Warcraft was built off the back of, and with the game hitting over 5.6 million subs during vanilla, it's clear that they were very effective. Elwin itself was many people's first introduction to the world, and it was quite clearly designed around that. It was lush and green, bar the marauding murlocs, and that really meant it was a pretty idyllic place. It felt like home, and it was home to the legendary Goldshire, a place that has a very warm and friendly feel, a perfect stepping stone for new players. I think this great feel was also backed up with what is, to this day, one of the most iconic bits of music in World of Warcraft. I mean, that theme just makes everyone have a little bit of a tinge of nostalgia. Apart from the orcs, who I suppose have their drums. How's that old Orgrimmar soundtrack going for you? Anyway, back on topic, Elwin was really cool, absolutely deserves its place here, and for me was certainly an extremely effective part of the world. The Grizzly Hills. what more needs to be said? I suppose I have to say something. It is a video after all. This zone's strength lies in its visual and feel aspects, a lot more than maybe its questing. Redwood trees are really cool, and this zone has loads of redwood trees. That's cool. Snow is cool, and this zone had a bit of snow. It did a snow. That's great. It had a big water slide. They're cool as well. And most notably of all, it was pure rustic as fuck, which, come on, that was so cool. And yeah, being a bit more serious, obviously, it was a very pretty zone. I don't think I need to go and explain to you what a rock is and what grass is. It just did that stuff all very well. Big thumbs up to the sort of environment designers there. Now, the music front is where this place really gets interesting, because it's easily got one of the best soundtracks in the game as far as I'm concerned. Not only is it wonderful standalone music, but it fits perfectly within the feel of the zone itself. Like most of World of Warcraft zones, this place is packed with lots of really nice details, from bears catching fish in the river to the lumberjack camps, the really interesting Iron Dwarf stuff. There was a lot of really good stuff there, and it was also one of the earlier appearances of our good friend Harrison Jones, and this time he didn't ruin an entire zone. Well done, Harrison. It's about time we dropped into Warlords of Draenor, and I think that Shadowmoon Valley is overall the best zone in Draenor. Not only does it look fantastic, but it's got a solid main plot and a nice smattering of side quests and cool little hubs here and there. It's really clear that Blizzard put a lot of time into this zone, and I think it totally nails the feel of being one of the centers of the Draenei civilization. Really great stuff. Of course, the lack of Karabor as a proper hub is a great pity, though the rest of the zone is absolutely strong enough to make it here. It's got great music, looks beautiful, and I really love what they did with the permanently Twilight kind of thing with this place. I only wish that Gorgrond, Taladar, and Nagrand lived up to this place, because Shadowmoon was so much better than them. A really fantastic zone. The Storm Peaks is, in many ways, very unique. It was designed with flying mounts in mind, and that's something which really shows in this zone's truly gigantic and impressive scale. The massive Titan structures and jagged peaks really made you feel tiny and insignificant in comparison to the size of those who created the game world itself. It's a pretty interesting concept. Of course, it was also littered with loads of Titan machinery, which obviously dwarfed us and was an extremely cool thing to fly through and see. It was a real visual departure from the more low-key Titan stuff that we had seen. It was also home to Uldum, which is widely considered to be one of the, if not the best raids in World of Warcraft. And this zone also had some excellent lore to back all this stuff up. Of course, there was the Titan backstory, there was the stuff going on with Thorm, and there were some great moments which harkened back to Warcraft 3, especially for the Alliance. And all of this was backed up with a soundtrack that really befitted the epic scope of this zone. Well, I couldn't do a Top Zones video without having Nagrand in somewhere. The real Nagrand absolutely deserves its fan favourite status. Visually, it's a very inspired mixture of the broken state of Outland with a really peaceful rolling plain. I absolutely loved how they didn't overclutter it visually, and they relied on giving you a really impressive view of the scenery all the time. This zone was really big, it felt big at least, but the view was never boring. Now, whether it was Oshugun, Hala, or just any of the floating islands, there was always something really eye-catching in sight. The quests of Nagrand were generally pretty good, but of course, you know, due to the time frame, this zone relies a lot more on its theme and world design to carry it into this list than the quality of the questing. Now, speaking of themes, we have its soundtrack. WoW has some brilliant music, and Nagrand is pretty much near the top of that list. It's got this almost Walking with Dinosaurs vibe, if you ever watched that BBC show, and it just was accompanied with this primal theme that really fit the zone excellently, and in my view, its music is absolutely key to the place working. Overall, Nagrand is just a lovely place to be in, and while some of the questing is not the best we've ever seen, I think overall this comes together to be an absolutely brilliant place, which is deserving of being a fan favourite. Icecrown must have been a really hard zone to nail. Being the seat of the Lich King's power, it had to feel dangerous. A tall order in a game where questing is pretty darn easy most of the time. Well, they certainly nailed it. Most of the zone is littered with corpses of fallen soldiers, so basically the place is so dangerous we're forced to make sorties from our puny little airships, rather than hold ground in the main glacier. That's the bit of kind of world design and like hub placement that backs up what the zone should really feel like, and that is dangerous. The zone itself was littered with elite mobs and military structures, which again shows how little power we have within it, another great storytelling sort of mechanic. All of this is backed up by really impressive music and a very solid visual design, especially in the case of the Scourge structures. In spite of all of this though, Icecrown was not without its moments of victory. It boasted some of the best questlines in the expansion, including the Argent, base creation thingy, Crusading Bride and Bard, or whatever the hell he's called, and that series of quests that sort of follows Arthas's madness. All really solid stuff. The Argent Tournament was also a brilliant addition which wholly juxtaposed the zone's very oppressive theme and brought some great variation to a zone and provide what was really a lovely hub for max level players to chill out and quest in. For a long time. A very long time. But still, all things considered, Icecrown absolutely wins. It's got the visuals, it's got the music, and it's got the quests. It really is the whole package, and of course it was basically finishing the story of Warcraft 3, which is a pretty major moment for many of the people who are invested in this franchise. And all of this brings us on to the Howling Fjord. No Top Zones video of mine would be complete without this zone. For me, it was a combination of absolutely everything that I like. First of all, the visuals, especially the introduction boat ride, were stunning. Like outlined before, this zone felt completely different to anything we'd seen in the game, and it absolutely nailed that sort of northern feel. It introduced the Vrykul, who again felt very at home in this place, and while it maybe wasn't the most unique art direction, it was still very strong, and it's great to hear that they will be returning in Legion. The introduction quests were also very strong, and they certainly conveyed the hostility of Northrend. You were pulling your allies off spikes, defending your half-constructed base, and performing final tasks for the downed paladin, and a few other pretty nice things as well. Plus we got some extremely interesting lore, even having an encounter with the Lich King himself. Moving on from there, the Tuskar are one of my favourite minor races in the game, and the various interactions with them were an absolute treat. And the music of this zone, of course, it's actually my favourite in the whole game. It really strikes that balance between being a great standalone piece, but also an excellent and very effective bit of ambient game music. Icecrown was the whole package, and the Howling Fjord is also, in my view, the whole package, but it's got a theme that just appeals to me more, and that's why the Howling Fjord gets number 1 on my video. So to conclude, what can we learn from all this stuff? Well, having a solid foundation in the general world is really important. You've probably noticed how much of this video was dealing with zones that were sort of covered in Warcraft 3 or that were related to the fallout of Warcraft 3. They had a great deal to work with there, and it really shows. Another point is music. Some of the most iconic sounds in the game, especially the ones which really evoke nostalgia, are much more low-key and ambient. The tracks which really sort of blend into the game world and add immersion, I think they really are the best ones. As much as I think their music is still some of the best in the business, and certainly they deserve their place in the Classic FM Hall of Fame, there are times when the more low-key touch is lost in favour for a booming and expensive orchestral score, which sometimes is just too much to be general ambient zone music that feels relaxing. Other than that, it's all about just having a great idea and carrying it out very well. Do you know what? Blizzard are pretty damn good at that. No other MMO's world has grabbed me as much as Warcraft's has, and I think it's one of their greatest strengths. From what we've seen of the Legion zones, they look very impressive, and hopefully their same winning formula will continue into this expansion. Certainly they did show a very strong hand with much of Warlords of Draenor. Do you disagree? Well, throw your top zones down in the description, and if you want to chat more about this topic, then hit me up on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you next time.